The park was quiet, almost serene. The sun hung low in the sky, casting a warm, golden hue over the neatly trimmed grass. Children played, couples strolled hand in hand, and elderly neighbors chatted under the shade of tall oaks. But at the far corner, an uncomfortable tension bubbled beneath the surface, unnoticed by most. As the wheelchair-bound young girl, Mia, wheeled herself closer to the playground, her eyes sparkled with excitement. It wasn't often she got to enjoy the outdoors, but today, it felt different. Today she was free. From across the park, Karen, the HOA president, watched with disdain. Her lips curled into a tight smile as she sauntered towards Mia, her steps deliberate, her gaze sharp. She had been waiting for this moment. She had been waiting for Mia and the family to step out of line. "Excuse me," Karen called out, her voice dripping with cold authority. Mia turned, her face lighting up with confusion. "Parks are for able-bodied residents only," Karen spat, her words laced with venom. "I think you should leave." The words struck Mia like a physical blow. Her hand gripped the armrests of her chair as she tried to process the cruelty of what had just been said. She glanced around, hoping for support, but the park remained eerily silent, as if the world was holding its breath. Karen took a step closer, her eyes narrowing. "This is for the betterment of the community. You don't belong here." Mia's heart raced, her hands trembling. Before she could speak, before she could respond to the hate in Karen's voice, Karen's hand moved her side. The glint of something metallic caught Mia's eye. In an instant, the world around them froze. The park, the sounds of children laughing, the rustling of leaves, everything vanished. All Mia could see was Karen, her finger tightening on the trigger. The shot rang out. And just like that, the park was no longer a place of freedom. It had become a battleground. Mia had always loved the park. As a child, she would visit with her family, her wheelchair bumping along the well-worn paths, her laughter mixing with the breeze. It was a place where she felt normal, where the limitations of her disability faded into the background of the vibrant, welcoming atmosphere. But now things had changed. The neighborhood had always been somewhat divided, with a few residents clinging to outdated notions of who belonged in their community. The Homeowners Association, or HOA, had long been a thorn in the side of many families. But it was Karen, the HOA president, who had made it personal. For months, Mia's family had received complaints about violating the community standards. It was subtle at first, a letter here, a stern warning there, all directed at things that seemed inconsequential: the family's landscaping, the fence in the backyard, even the way their dog was walked. Each note felt like an attack, an attempt to push them out, but Mia's family always complied, believing in the goodness of their community. Karen had been at the heart of every complaint, her name on every piece of correspondence. She had made it clear that she was the one who decided who fit in and who didn't. Mia's family was seen as different in Karen's eyes, not just because they lived differently, but because Mia, a disabled child, reminded her of a world she didn't want to acknowledge. Karen had a vision of the community, pristine, perfect, and full of able-bodied residents who never stirred the waters. She couldn't fathom that someone like Mia, confined to a wheelchair, could want to be a part of that world. The subtle harassment had escalated. At first, Karen had simply made snide remarks when she saw Mia's family out in the park. "You know, people come here to enjoy their day, not to be reminded of things that don't belong," she would say, her voice sugar-sweet, yet dripping with disdain. But as time passed, Karen's behavior grew more aggressive. The park, which had once been a place of refuge for Mia, had become a battleground, and Karen, its fiercest enforcer. This morning was no different. As Mia wheeled herself closer to the playground, Karen stood by, her arms folded tightly across her chest, watching like a hawk. Her eyes narrowed as Mia approached, as if daring her to cross an invisible line. Mia had grown used to this, the feeling of being watched, of being judged, but today felt different. It was as if Karen had reached her limit. The passive-aggressive comments and constant rules had turned into something darker, something far more dangerous. The air was thick with tension, and Mia could sense it before Karen even spoke. "You don't belong here," Karen had said, The words a slap to the face. Mia's heart sank, but she didn't back down. She couldn't. Little did she know, Karen wasn't finished. Not by a long shot. The next few days felt like a slow burn, each encounter with Karen adding another log to the fire. Mia tried to ignore her, to continue her daily life as best as she could. But the quiet, subtle harassment never stopped. Every time she left the house, Karen was there, lurking at the corner of her eye. It was as if Karen had made it her personal mission to remind Mia of her place. One afternoon, Mia was at the park again. The weather was perfect, the sky, a crisp blue, and the park was filled with children laughing and playing. It was supposed to be a peaceful escape, a brief moment of normalcy. But as Mia wheeled herself along the pathway, she saw Karen standing near the bench by the fountain, arms crossed, her gaze sharp. The moment their eyes met, Mia's heart began to race. She had no idea what Karen would do today, but she knew it wouldn't be anything good. "You're not supposed to be here," Karen said, her voice cutting through the hum of the park like a knife. She spoke loudly enough that a few nearby parents glanced over in surprise, but they quickly turned away, too uncomfortable to get involved. Mia froze, her fingers trembling against the wheels of her chair. Mia started, her voice barely above a whisper. She had to force herself to speak, to not let the tremor in her voice give away the fear she was feeling. "Just what?" Karen interrupted, stepping closer. "You think you can come here and disrupt the peace just because you want to be here? This park is for everyone, but that doesn't mean anyone can just come and ruin it with their disabilities." Mia's heart sank. The word disabilities felt like an insult, a word that Karen used to diminish everything Mia had ever worked for. It wasn't the first time Karen had made a remark about Mia's condition, but it stung more than usual today. The weight of it pressed on her chest, and the frustration, the endless strain of being pushed to the sidelines, seemed to reach a breaking point. Mia looked around, but no one dared to speak up. No one even moved. This was the reality she faced every day, the silent complicity of the community, the unspoken agreement that they would all turn a blind eye. They were all too afraid to stand against Karen, too afraid of what might happen if they did. It was easier to ignore the problem and hope it went away. Karen took another step closer, her smile cold and cruel. "I don't know why you bother coming here. You're just a nuisance to everyone else. You should just stay home where you belong." The words hit like a slap to the face. Mia's eyes burned with unshed tears, but she refused to let them fall. She had to keep her composure, to keep her dignity intact. She had spent her whole life learning to rise above this kind of treatment, to not let the cruelty of others define her. But today, something was different. Today, she felt a fire inside her, a rage she hadn't allowed herself to feel before. She gritted her teeth, trying to steady her breathing, to calm the storm raging inside her. But the more she tried to contain it, the more it threatened to spill over. How much longer could she take this? The constant judgment, the whispering, the hateful comments. It was all too much. Every day felt like a battle she was losing. "Why do you keep doing this to me?" Mia finally asked, her voice thick with emotion. It was a question that had been building in her for months. She had always tried to be the bigger person, to rise above, but now her patience had worn thin. She was tired of being strong, tired of pretending that the constant harassment didn't hurt, didn't wear her down. Karen raised an eyebrow, a smug grin playing at the corner of her lips. "Because I can," she said, her voice dripping with superiority. "Because people like you don't belong here. You think the world owes you something just because you can't walk? You think we should all cater to your needs? Well, we don't." Mia's hands clenched into fists. Every part of her wanted to scream, to lash out, to make Karen understand the pain she had caused. But she didn't. Instead, she forced herself to turn away, to wheel herself toward the exit of the park, feeling the sting of Karen's words with every turn of the wheel. But as she left, a small voice inside her whispered, "Not anymore. Not this time." The emotional toll of these encounters had been slowly chipping away at Mia's resolve. She had always been a fighter, But the constant battle for her place in the world was taking a heavy toll. Each small, cruel interaction with Karen was like a small cut, deepening over time, and Mia could feel herself growing tired, as if she were sinking under the weight of it all. The frustration and anger were bubbling beneath the surface, waiting for the moment when she would finally snap. She knew one thing for sure. The next time they met, things would be different. The next afternoon, Mia found herself back at the park. It wasn't a decision she had made lightly. She had told herself she wouldn't go back, that she wouldn't let Karen win. But something inside her kept pushing her forward. She wanted to enjoy the park like everyone else, to feel the warm breeze on her face and the grass beneath her wheels. It was her right, after all. As Mia rolled closer to the playground, her eyes instinctively sought out the bench where Karen had been sitting the last few days. She was there as expected, but today something felt different. Karen wasn't just standing idly by. She was watching Mia, glaring with an intensity that sent a chill down her spine. Mia tried to ignore her, to focus on the kids playing nearby and the sounds of laughter filling the air. But Karen's presence loomed large, casting a shadow over everything. The tension between them was palpable, and Mia could feel the weight of it pressing down on her chest. Then Karen stood up, her heels clicking sharply on the pavement. Mia braced herself, her hands gripping the wheelchair handles tighter, as if somehow that would give her strength. Karen walked over, her steps measured and deliberate, each one echoing in the silence of the park. Mia's heart began to race. "You really don't know when to quit, do you?" Karen's voice was like ice, smooth and cold. "You just don't get it, do you? This park is for everyone, not just for you." Mia could feel the heat rising in her face, but she forced herself to stay calm. "I'm not doing anything wrong. I just want to be here like everyone else." Karen shook her head, a mocking smile curling at her lips. "No, you don't. You think the world owes you something because you're in that chair? You think you deserve special treatment? Well, let me tell you something you don't. People like you don't belong here. Not in this community." Mia's breath caught in her throat. The words were sharp, calculated, and they struck deeper than any physical blow. She had heard similar things before, but today, Karen's hostility felt different, more personal, more cutting. "Stop it," Mia said, her voice trembling with a mix of anger and disbelief. "You don't have the right to say that. I have every right to be here, just like anyone else." Karen leaned in closer, her face twisted with disdain. "No, you don't," she spat. "You don't belong here. This park, this community, they're for people who fit in. You're a disruption, a reminder of everything that's wrong with this world. A world that's too busy coddling people like you." Mia's hands were shaking now, her knuckles white against the wheelchair handles. She could feel the heat of Karen's words burning through her, but she wasn't going to back down. "Not this time. I'm not going anywhere," Mia said firmly, her voice stronger than she felt. "This is my community too. I've as much right to be here as you do." Karen's eyes narrowed, and for a moment, it felt as though the world had come to a standstill. The anger between them was thick, like a storm ready to break. Then Karen's gaze shifted, and Mia noticed the way she was clutching something in her hand. It was too quick for Mia to fully register, but Karen's grip tightened, and the sound of something metallic clicking into place sent a jolt of fear straight to Mia's chest. "You don't understand," Karen hissed, stepping back slightly. "I've been too patient." But patience has its limits. Mia's heart skipped a beat. She could see the gun now, the cold, gleaming barrel in Karen's hand. Her mind raced, her body frozen in place. The park, the people around them, everything felt like it had disappeared, leaving only the two of them locked in a deadly standoff. "Karen, please." Mia's voice faltered, the realization sinking in that this wasn't just a verbal confrontation anymore. This was something far more dangerous. "Get out of my park," Karen sneered, her finger inching toward the trigger. "Now!" Mia's blood ran cold. The words that Karen had used, the way she had manipulated every encounter, every interaction, all of it had led to this moment. It was no longer just about park rules or community standards. It was about control, about power. And in this moment, Mia realized that Karen wasn't interested in compromise or understanding. She wanted to break her, to prove that she didn't belong. With a shaky breath, Mia forced herself to meet Karen's eyes. "I won't leave." The gun shook in Karen's hands, her face a twisted mask of rage. But Mia was done being afraid. This was her moment, her fight, her space, her life. And she wasn't going to back down. Not now. Not ever. The tension in the park seemed to stretch for miles, the space between Mia and Karen charged with a thick, suffocating air. The gun in Karen's hand wasn't just a weapon, it was a symbol of everything that had led to this moment. Mia could feel the weight of it pressing down on her chest, each breath harder than the last. Her pulse was a drumbeat in her ears, her body rigid with fear and anger. But more than anything, there was a deep, aching weariness. It was as if every word Karen had ever said, every judgment, every sneer, had been a stone placed upon her shoulders. And now, in this moment, all those stones were crashing down, threatening to crush her beneath their weight. She had spent so long enduring, staying silent, letting it slide, pretending that it didn't matter. But it had all led here, to this confrontation, to this breaking point. She wasn't just fighting Karen anymore. She was fighting every moment of feeling less than, every moment of being pushed aside, every single time she had been made to feel like she didn't belong. Her hands gripped the wheels of her chair, the only thing holding her steady. But even they were trembling now. The quiet, uncomfortable park was gone. There was no one around, no one who cared enough to step in. Everyone was pretending it wasn't happening, pretending they didn't see the gun aimed directly at her. "You should have known better than to come here," Karen spat, her voice full of venom. "People like you don't belong in my perfect community." Mia's chest tightened. The words stung, and yet they weren't new. She had heard them before in passing, in the whispered conversations when no one thought she was listening. But this time, they carried the weight of a threat. They were no longer just words, they were a sentence. "I'm not going anywhere." Mia managed, her voice strained but steady. She hadn't intended to say it. The words just came out, like the last shred of her resolve, desperate to break free. But Karen's smile only grew colder, her grip on the gun tightening. "You don't have a choice," she hissed. Mia's mind was racing. What if she couldn't stand up to her? What if this was the moment she failed, the moment Karen won? Her body felt weak, like the blood was draining from her limbs. Everything she had endured, every time she had felt different, every time Karen had snubbed her or thrown her a hateful look, it all rushed back. The fight for normalcy, for acceptance, for the right to exist in this space, in this community, was suffocating her. She was tired, so tired. Tired of being the bigger person, tired of pretending like everything was okay, like Karen's words didn't hurt, like the judgment of the entire neighborhood wasn't slowly crushing her spirit. And for a brief moment, Mia almost let herself give in to the weight of it all. Maybe she should just leave. Maybe it would be easier to walk away, to spare herself from the conflict, to avoid whatever it was Karen might do next. The thought crossed her mind like a shadow, but as soon as it did, something inside her snapped. This wasn't just about the park anymore. It was about her life. It was about her right to exist, to take up space, to live without fear. She wasn't going to let Karen win. Not like this. "You don't get to decide who belongs," Mia said, her voice growing stronger with every word, her body trembling with the raw power of her conviction. "I belong here. And no matter how hard you try to push me down, I'm not going anywhere. Not now. Not ever." The words were like fire, igniting a sense of power she hadn't felt in so long. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, Mia felt a surge of courage, a defiance that burned brighter than any fear. She was tired, yes, but she was also tired of being afraid. She was tired of shrinking back. Karen's face twisted in anger, her lips curling into a snarl. But Mia didn't look away. She didn't back down. The gun was still there, but in that moment, it felt like it didn't matter. Mia had found her strength, her voice, and she wasn't going to let Karen or anyone else take it away. The tension that had been building for weeks, even months, finally reached its boiling point. The park, which had once been a place of joy and freedom, now felt like a battlefield. Every step Mia took toward the playground, every inch of the path she navigated in her wheelchair, felt like it was dragging her closer to an inevitable confrontation. She had tried to avoid it, tried to hold on to the hope that things could change, that Karen's constant harassing and demeaning behavior would eventually stop. But today, as Mia approached the swings where she'd spent countless afternoons as a child, she knew there would be no more avoiding it. Today, Karen had pushed her too far. Mia wasn't alone this time. Her mother, Clara, had joined her for the first time in weeks. They had been trying to find small moments of peace in the chaos, and today, despite the tension in the air, Clara had insisted on coming with Mia. She had always supported her daughter, even when the world around them seemed bent on tearing them down. Clara's presence was a comfort, a reminder that Mia was not in this fight alone. But today, the comfort felt fragile, like a thin sheet of glass that might shatter at any moment. Mia wheeled herself to the edge of the swings, the familiar sound of the chains creaking in the wind, almost enough to distract her from the dread building in her chest. But then she saw Karen. She was standing at the far side of the park, her arms folded tightly across her chest, eyes locked on Mia like a predator watching its prey. Karen was still dressed in her usual pristine outfit, the tailored coat, the perfectly pressed pants, a reflection of the control she so desperately clung to. But today, something was different. There was a coldness in her stance, an intensity in her eyes that Mia hadn't seen before. And that's when Mia noticed it. The glint of metal in Karen's hand, the way she gripped it like a lifeline, like the weapon in her hand was the only thing standing between her and the world she wanted to control. Mia's heart skipped a beat. It wasn't just a threat anymore. It was real. Her mother, Clara, noticed too, and her face drained of color. "Mia, we need go." Now, Clara whispered urgently, grabbing her daughter's shoulder. But Mia shook her head, her eyes never leaving Karen's figure. She knew what was coming. She had known it for a long time. "I'm not going anywhere," Mia said, her voice calm, but there was a fire burning beneath the surface, a fire that had been waiting for this moment. "This is my park. My right." Clara looked around, desperate for anyone to intervene. But the park was as quiet as ever, save for the wind rustling the leaves in the trees. No one was stepping forward. No one was speaking up. It was just Mia, her mother, and Karen standing at the center of a storm that was about to erupt. Karen's lips curled into a smirk as she approached, her fingers tight around the handle of the gun. "You should have left when I told you to, Mia. You should have known better. People like you don't belong here. You're a disruption, a nuisance." Mia's eyes flashed with fury. She had heard those words countless times before, but today, they felt like a punch to the gut. She wasn't just a nuisance. She wasn't just a burden. She was a person. She was strong, capable, and deserving of the same respect as anyone else in that park. She wasn't going to let Karen take that away from her. "You don't get to decide who belongs," Mia said, her voice steady, despite the pounding of her heart in her chest. "You don't get to control me. Not anymore." Karen's eyes narrowed, her grip tightening around the gun as she took another step closer. The air around them seemed to crackle, the tension so thick it was almost unbearable. For a moment, neither of them moved. The world seemed to hold its breath. Then, without warning, Karen raised the gun, pointing it directly at Mia's head. "Leave. Now." Karen spat, her voice trembling with anger. Mia's breath caught in her throat, her mind racing. Everything in her screamed to run, to find safety, to protect her life. But something deeper inside her refused to let her give in. This wasn't just a fight for her life. It was a fight for her dignity, for her right to exist without fear. She was done running. She had fought too hard, endured too much, to let Karen take everything from her. "No," Mia said, her voice unwavering. "You're not going to scare me anymore." In that moment, time seemed to slow. The gun in Karen's hand felt like it was the only thing in the world, its cold, metallic surface reflecting the anger in Karen's eyes. Mia's heart hammered in her chest, but she wasn't afraid anymore. She was done being afraid. Karen hesitated, her finger trembling against the trigger. For a split second, there was a flicker of uncertainty in her eyes, a moment where the world seemed to stop. But then, just as quickly, it was gone, replaced by the twisted resolve that had driven her all along. With a sharp intake of breath, Karen pulled the trigger. The shot rang out through the park, its deafening sound shattering the silence. But it wasn't Mia who fell. It wasn't her mother who screamed in horror. It wasn't the sound of a life taken. It was the sound of something breaking, something finally snapping in Karen, and for the briefest of moments, the look on her face was not that of a villain, but of a woman consumed by the weight of her own actions. Mia sat frozen in her chair, her body alive with adrenaline, her heart racing. She couldn't hear anything for a moment, the world gone silent around her. And then, slowly, she realized that the bullet hadn't struck her. It hadn't hit anyone at all. Karen's shot had missed, but in that moment, it didn't matter. The damage had been done. Karen's body trembled, the gun shaking in her hand as she stood there, unable to move, unable to process what had just happened. She had come so close to pulling the trigger, to ending everything, but Mia had survived, and in that survival there was power. There was defiance. Mia had made it through. She had faced her fear, and she wasn't backing down. The sound of the shot reverberated through the park, a single, piercing crack that shattered the tense silence. Mia remained frozen in her wheelchair, every nerve in her body screaming, her heart pounding in her ears. But as the smoke from the gunshot began to clear, she realized with a mix of relief and confusion that the bullet had missed her. It had flown past her head, embedding itself into the tree behind her. For a moment, time seemed to stop. Karen stood there, the gun still raised, her hands shaking violently. Her face was a mix of disbelief and rage. Mia's mind raced, trying to make sense of the chaos unfolding before her. The world around her seemed to blur, the once calm park now filled with a suffocating tension. Clara, Mia's mother, screamed in terror and rushed to her daughter's side, pushing her away from the scene, her hands trembling as she gripped Mia's wheelchair. The few onlookers in the park were now frozen in place, either too frightened to act or too confused to know what to do. No one moved to intervene, and no one called for help. It was as if everyone was waiting for someone else to make the first move. Karen's eyes darted around frantically, but her grip on the gun remained firm. Her chest heaved as she tried to catch her breath, the reality of what she had almost done settling in. But instead of remorse or fear, what Mia saw in Karen's eyes was anger. She hadn't been shaken by the consequences of her actions. No, Karen was furious because she hadn't succeeded in what she had set out to do. She hadn't broken Mia. She hadn't proven her dominance. "Get out of my park." Karen screamed, her voice hoarse with frustration. "You don't belong here. None of you do." Mia's heart ached, not just from the terror of the moment, but from the cold cruelty of Karen's words. She was still trying to process the fact that Karen had raised a gun to her, that the woman had nearly taken her life, and yet all Karen cared about was maintaining control, about preserving her idea of a perfect, exclusive community. A few seconds passed, but to Mia, it felt like an eternity. Clara finally managed to find her voice. "Karen, stop. Put the gun down." Her voice was sharp, trembling with fear, but firm with desperation. "You're making a mistake. This isn't you." But Karen didn't seem to hear her. Instead, she turned and started walking quickly, her heels clicking loudly against the pavement. Her head was down, her body tense, as if she couldn't bear to face anyone. She was trying to leave the scene, to escape the consequences of what she had just done. Clara pulled Mia away, urging her to get out of the park. "Mia, we need to go. Now." Her voice was frantic, but Mia couldn't move. Her body was numb with shock. The world around her seemed distant, as if she were watching everything unfold through a thick fog. Just then, a voice cut through the haze. It was a man from the crowd, an older gentleman who had been sitting near the fountain. "She should be arrested. "Someone call the cops," he shouted, his voice shaky with anger. The park, which had once been quiet and serene, was now a chaotic scene of voices rising in disbelief and outrage. Others started to murmur, some hesitating, some angrily agreeing. It was clear that Karen's actions had shocked the community, but the response was divided. Some were too afraid to get involved, not wanting to risk Karen's wrath or the potential legal consequences. Others, like the older man, were ready to call for action. "Call the police." "She tried to kill that girl," another person shouted, his voice trembling with emotion. The park, once a symbol of peace, was now a place of outrage. But even as some of the onlookers began to stir, others remained silent, unwilling to speak out or take a stand. Mia could feel the weight of their silence pressing down on her. It was as if they were silently condoning what had just happened, unsure of where to place the blame, unsure of whether they should take sides. The police arrived within minutes, sirens wailing as the authorities descended upon the park. Karen was still nowhere to be found. Mia and Clara were taken into custody by the officers to make their statements, their accounts of the incident written down, their hands shaking with the weight of everything that had happened. The investigation into Karen's actions began, but the legal and moral implications were murky. On the one hand, Karen had clearly attempted to use deadly force, and the evidence was clear: the gun, the threat, the eyewitness accounts. But the community's reaction was mixed. Some saw Karen as a woman pushed to her limits, someone who had lost control of her emotions after years of feeling powerless. Others saw her for what she truly was: a bully, a tyrant who had used her position to enforce her twisted sense of power. Mia's family was caught in the middle of it all. Despite the overwhelming evidence, the legal system had its own agenda. The question of whether Karen would be fully held accountable for her actions loomed large. Would the justice system prevail, or would it fail Mia, as it so often failed those without power? Mia's own sense of justice was torn. She wanted Karen to face the consequences of what she had done, to be held accountable for putting her life at risk. But at the same time, she couldn't help but feel the weight of the community's judgment. Was the law on her side, or would it favor the one who held power? Was Karen just another person who had used her position to escape the consequences of her actions? In the end, it wasn't just about the immediate fallout of the gunshot. It was about the deeper, more troubling question of who truly held the power in the community. Was it the people who were brave enough to stand up to fight for justice, or was it the ones who could manipulate the system, twist the narrative, and walk away without consequences? For Mia, the aftermath wasn't just about surviving the shooting. It was about surviving in a world that seemed determined to leave her behind. It was about navigating a system that wasn't designed for people like her, a system that made her question whether justice would ever be truly served. The days following the confrontation in the park were a blur of media attention, police investigations, and community meetings. The neighborhood, once quiet and segregated, was now buzzing with anger, fear, and debates over what had happened. Mia and Clara found themselves at the center of it all, their every word scrutinized, their lives turned upside down. But for Mia, the chaos outside was nothing compared to the turmoil she felt within. As she sat in her room, alone with her thoughts, she replayed the events over and over again. The gunshot, the fear, the shock, but most of all, the moment when Karen had almost broken her. Mia's mind returned to the look in Karen's eyes, the anger, the frustration that had driven the woman to pull the trigger. For so long, Mia had tried to fit in, to be what others expected of her. She had allowed herself to be a passive observer in her own life, allowing people like Karen to dictate her worth. But that moment, the moment the gun had missed her, had changed everything. Mia wasn't the same person she had been before that day. She wasn't just the disabled girl trying to carve a space for herself in a world that didn't understand her. She was someone who had stood up for herself, someone who had faced fear head-on and survived. And though the scars from that day would remain, they wouldn't define her. What mattered was that she was still here. She had fought for her right to exist in this world, and she wasn't about to back down. The legal battle with Karen had yet to fully play out, but Mia had already begun to change how she viewed her place in the world. She had gained a new understanding of her own power. The truth was she had always belonged. She had the right to take up space, to be seen, to be heard, and no one could take that from her anymore. Sitting by the window, Mia looked out at the park, the place where it all had started. She didn't feel fear anymore. Instead, she felt a quiet strength, knowing that no matter what happened next, she had already won. She had reclaimed her life, her voice, and her place in the world. And that was something no one could ever take away from her. "I belong here," Mia whispered to herself, the words resonating in the stillness of her room. If Mia's story resonated with you, take a moment to reflect on your own journey. Are you standing up for your right to be seen, to be heard, and to belong? We all have the power to reclaim our space in the world, no matter the obstacles we face. If you've ever felt overlooked or silenced, remember, your voice matters, your story matters. Stand tall, speak out, and embrace the strength within you. Don't let anyone decide your worth. Join the conversation, share this story, raise awareness, and inspire others to take action in their own lives. Together, we can build a world where everyone belongs and where no one is left behind. Share your thoughts and experiences in the comments below, and let's continue to fight for justice, equality, and the right to be who we truly are.